Hello everyone, I am Dr. Devesh Mishra and today we are going to have a short discussion of the AIMS question which came in June 2020 exam, right? So today we are going to discuss about the AIMS PG exam 2020 discussion, and here I will request you that if you want to suggest any change in the option, you can mail me at my email ID, which is drdev555 at the rate of gmail.com, or you can message me at my page also. This is my page and this is my Instagram, right? So you can follow me at these areas also for seeing further discussion, and you can mail me if there is any change in the option or in any kind of answer also. You can ask me the controversy, right? So let's start this discussion. So first question was very odd question. Here I will say that in this AIMS exam, majority of the question in pathology was from the book only, from the Robbins only, but few questions were little wayward, not from the books, which was little unusual for the AIMS. Usually they used to ask majority of the question, but this time they had asked so many questions which were above the level of undergraduate, like this question which we are going to discuss. Right, question number 1 is true regarding liquid based cytology, right? If you look at the option A, B, C and D, right? So liquid based cytology, as you can see, the name itself is telling, right? This name itself is telling in liquid based cytology we take the fluid for the cytological examination, right? So there is a fluid which will be using, and the fluid will be used for this. So here, but it is not a study of the fluid in the tumor microenvironment. Remember, this language is deceptive. It is not the study of fluid in the tumor. It is the tumor which is in the fluid which we are going to study. Remember, it is tumor which will be in the fluid, right? So answer should be the urine examination. So here we have to remember that urine examination is the answer. It is not used for here. Sanger sequencing is not applicable here. It is not used often, right? So it is very rarely used, right? So it is not used often. What is often used, we collect the fluid sample and we will see the cells in the fluid. So it is the cytology of the fluid we are going to see in the liquid based cytology. So answer is B, right? So here we have to understand urine sample is used. Liquid based cytology is a method of preparing sample of the examination of the cytopathology. So what we are doing to study is the cytopathology. What kind of cytopathology? Here you can see we can use even the urine cytology also, right? Urine cytology, why we are doing and what we can do. Actually liquid based cytology was initially used for the cervical cancer, but now it has been advanced and it can be used for the detection of the urothelial carcinoma and certain infections like a human papilloma virus, mycoplasma and ureaplasma, right? So these infections can also be detected in the liquid based urinary cytology, which is also called as LBURC, right? What is the advantage of the conventional pap smear or conventional cytology? When we are doing conventional cytology, remember, conventional cytology, we are collecting the sample and we are directly applying to the slide. Remember, directly applying to the slide, right? So what happens when we are collecting the sample and we are applying onto the slide? There will be loss of many cells. Many cells will be left out. So we cannot see those cells. Maybe those cells will be containing some cancer or some inflammatory markers, right? So that is why now this has been taken over by the liquid based cytology, where sample will be collected in the liquid vials, right? So it will be collected in the liquid vials, and now the slide is prepared in a semi-automatic manner. So here number of cells which will be taken will be having high precision. Here you can see in conventional cytology there will be loss of 80% of the cells. 80% cells will be lost, and here you can see there is 100% cells can be processed, right? So that is the very important thing. That is why you can see advantage of liquid based cytology is reduction in the number of inadequate. The basic problem in cytology is inadequate. You might be seeing the report also that this sample is inadequate. So that inadequacy we can overcome by liquid based cytology, right? Then we can see that there is an increased sensitivity of the test and productivity of the smear, right? So now you can see that question number 1, liquid based cytology, you have to use the fluid in the form of urine, or it is used for the cervical cancer analysis also. So that is also another important thing we have to understand. Now coming to the second question, this is again a very unusual question. See, these are the questions I will suggest you should not be deviated or start reading hi-fi books after seeing these questions. See, these are the deviators, right, which are pulling you away from your goal. If you start reading cytopathology in this detail, see, 1 or 2 questions they are asking in 3 or 4 years. So we should not rely on this thing. Whatever examiner had asked, Yes, whatever examiner had asked, we should read about them and in and around them, because probability of getting a question from those areas will be very high, right? So need not to read entire cytology book and then you come for exam, so that will be wasting your time, right? So let us see what is this question. Question is little odd one. He is not asking about the routine fixative, he is talking about the cross-linking fixative. Right, cross-linking fixative. Cross-linking means they are forming covalent bond or some bond between the fixatives or between the cells, that these are called as cross-linking fixatives, right? So which of the following is not a cross-linking fixative? So I will tell you straightforward, ethanol is not a cross-linking fixative, right? Ethanol is not a cross-linking fixative. So answer is ethanol. Rest of the other options are cross-linking fixative. Remember, fixatives are usually to preserve the cell or tissue architecture, right? So they want to preserve, when we want to preserve tissue architecture, we will add fixative so that tissue will not be biodegraded by the microorganism, right? And these fixatives we can divide into three parts. Remember, these are chemical fixatives and we can divide chemical fixatives into three parts. So this discussion is important and you may get some future question from here. So what are the three fixatives? You can see number one is coagulant, second is cross-linking, and third is the mixture of all, right? So that is called compound. So coagulant fixative, what is the function? They will remove the water and they will cause coagulation or denaturation of the protein, right? So denaturation of the protein will be there. So what is alcohol? So now you understood, our answer was ethanol. So maybe the future question can be, what is ethanol? So ethanol is a coagulant fixative, that can be a future question, right? Ethanol is a coagulant fixative, that can be. So all the alcoholic ones, remember, all these alcoholic fixatives are examples of the coagulant fixative, right? Cross-linking fixatives, who are the cross-linking fixative? Aldehydes. Remember, aldehydes, formaldehyde, glutaraldehyde and osmium tetroxide, right? So now you understood, formaldehyde, glutaraldehyde, osmium tetroxide, these are cross-linking fixative. Compound fixative is a mixture of the compounds, right? So you can see formol saline, buffered formalin, right? Formol calcium, Jenker fluid, Jenker formol. So all these are compound fixative, right? So what examiner had asked earlier in AIIMS exam and All India exam, I want to say, I want to discuss that also. See this, ethanol, when you are using 95% of ethanol, remember 95% of ethanol is the best fixative for cytology. Remember, that was the question in earlier AIIMS exam and they will definitely repeat in coming exams also, right? So 95% of ethanol is for cytology. See that formaldehyde, or you can, I will just write here 10% formalin, not formaldehyde, 10% formalin is the best for histopathological examination. So that was the another important and frequently asked question in exam, right? Previous year PGI exam, there was a question, glutaraldehyde is for, remember, glutaraldehyde is for, just writing in short, for electron microscopy. Remember, if glutaraldehyde, see, these are the best fixative. Glutaraldehyde is best for the electron microscopy, right? Apart from the glutaraldehyde, you should remember even that osmium tetroxide is also used for electron microscopy, but the best one is the glutaraldehyde. Second best is osmium tetroxide, right? So examiner may ask these questions in future also, right? So now you understood the cross-linking. Ethanol or alcoholic fixatives are the coagulant fixative. Aldehyde fixatives are the cross-linking fixative. Remember, did you understand? Cross-linking fixatives are the aldehyde. So this point we have to remember, aldehydes are the cross-linking, right? Coagulant are the alcohol, right? So that is how in a simple word we can remember. Alcohol is a coagulant, aldehyde is a cross-linking. So formaldehyde, glutaraldehyde, osmium tetroxide, all these are the cross-linking fixative. Now coming to the third question, which is not a part of pap smear. See, this is again unusual question. That is why I kept that in the beginning, right? When we are going for the pap smear staining, right? What we do now, you can see here, right? So see, answer is the B, right? So here you can see that what is not a part of pap smear. So here answer is B. Eosin B is not a part of pap smear. So it is not eosin B, it is eosin Y, which will be the part of pap smear staining. Orange, light green, SF, hematoxylin, all are the part of pap smear staining. See, what I am discussing here is the classical Classic form of the Pap staining. Classic form of the Pap staining will be consisting of 5 dyes into 3 solutions. So 5 dyes, 3 solutions. So what are the 3 solutions? Hematoxylin, Orange G, Eosin, Azure. Now you can see that hematoxylin is for nucleus staining, right? Orange G is for keratin staining, right? So Orange G6 is for keratin staining. Eosin Azure, you can see it is Eosin Azure which we are using. They are consisting of 3 dyes, right? So what are these 3 dyes? It's Eosin Y, not B. Can you see this? It is B. It should be Y. So Eosin Y, light green SF, which was given there. And remember, this is for future exam, Bismarck Brown Y stain, right? So you can understood that it is Eosin Y which is used. So hematoxylin, Orange G, light green SF, Eosin Y will be used, not Eosin B, right? So answer is this one, right? So now fixation or for any pap smear or cytological smear, as I have told you, 95% of ethanol is the best fixative. That was the question in AIIMS and PGI exam and All India exam also, right? So now the question is over. Now we will be moving to the next question. Next question is again a very high-fi question. I will again suggest you don't worry about these kind of MCQs. I know that it's a tough time, but it doesn't matter. You should not run behind the cytopathology, right? So just run around whatever is mentioned here and we will discuss that area. We need not to go and dwell entire cytology of the thyroid gland. It will be not a very wiseful step, right? So the question number 4 is adequate specimen in case of FNAC thyroid will be, right? So this according to the Bethesda system says that adequacy of this specimen will be when you are seeing the 6 follicular cell groups. You have to follow the 6 follicular cell groups and each group should be having 10 to 15 cells. That is the Bethesda classification. So answer is D. So it's a straightforward question. Minimum adequacy criteria for thyroid FNAC. That is the question, right? So what I have said, Bethesda system of the reporting cytopathology recommends at least six groups of the follicular cells and each group should be containing 10 cells. That is the important thing. So 6 follicular group cells and 10 cells should be present in each group, right? But remember, this Bethesda criteria is not followed for these exceptions. So what are these exceptions? When you are seeing the colloid, when you are having so much of inflammation in the thyroid, and when you are seeing any atypia of the thyroid, where you are suspecting a single cell is showing atypia which is suggestive of the cancer, so that time also we will not be following this rule, right? So now you understood colloidal goiter, inflammatory thyroiditis and atypia. These are the 3 exceptions where we will not use this criteria of the Bethesda, like 6 group of follicular cells each containing 10 cells is not followed for these 3 exceptions, right? Now coming to the next question. Which of the following is not an alpha synucleinopathies? I have discussed this many times in my lecture also, right? I used to tell about the Parkinson disease is a alpha synuclein protein, right? And if you remember that there is a Levy body. Levy body is also made up of alpha synuclein protein. Multi-system atrophy is also having alpha synuclein. Alzheimer disease, they do not have alpha synuclein. Alzheimer disease, usually they have neurofibrillary tangles or they will be having Hirano bodies which is made up of alpha actin. So they will be having Hirano bodies which is made up of alpha actin, right? So whatever here it is written, all these 3 disorders A, B and C, Parkinson's, dementia with Levy bodies, multiple system atrophy, these are collectively called as synucleinopathies or also known as alpha synucleinopathies. These are the neurodegenerative disorders, and it is because of the this neurodegeneration is because of the damage caused by excessive accumulation of the alpha synuclein protein. Remember, alpha synuclein protein in the neurons, nerve fibers or glial cells. So what are these 3 disorders? Parkinson's, Levy body dementia, multiple system atrophy. So answer is Alzheimer disease. Alzheimer disease, you will be seeing Hirano bodies which is made up of alpha actin protein. This is again a very simple question in exam. Which of the following is not a complication of the massive blood transfusion, right? So whenever we are giving massive blood transfusion, so what will happen? See, there is a more citrate in the blood bag. So this citrate will be metabolized and they will be forming bicarbonate. excess amount of bicarbonate will be leading to the metabolic alkalosis, right? Because of the metabolic alkalosis, they will be having hypokalemia, right? So now you can see there is a hypokalemia, right? So metabolic alkalosis number 1, hypokalemia number 2. So you can see that hypokalemia is there, right? Because of the citrate is more. So what citrate will do? What citrate will do? Citrate is going to chelate calcium. So it is going to chelate calcium. So if chelate calcium, then what will happen? There is a hypocalcemia, right? So there is a hypocalcemia. So you will see hypocalcemia also, right? And when you are giving massive blood transfusion, there is a more number of RBC. So because of the RBC damage also, their potassium will be released and they will be having hyperkalemia also, right? So what I want to say that now you will be having a confusion. We are seeing hyperkalemia also, we are seeing hypokalemia also. So what is more common? So remember, hypokalemia is more common. So that is the question in DNB exam also. So this is very important and very frequently asked question. So we are seeing hyperkalemia also. So what is not seen? So answer is hypercalcemia is not a complication of the massive blood transfusion, right? So hypercalcemia is not a complication of the massive blood transfusion. So answer is B. So we can see answer is B. Now coming to the next question, this is again an easy question. ESR is increased in pregnancy is due to elevation of. Remember, it is due to elevation of the fibrinogen. Simple, right? So it is due to elevation of the fibrinogen. Albumin is decreased, right? So albumin is decreased, so it is not because of that. So now you can see answer is A. ESR increases during pregnancy due to increase in fibrinogen and globulin level, right? But albumin level is decreased. Remember, there is a fall in albumin. So this can be a future question also, right? So remember, AIIMS people have this tendency. So remember, fibrinogen will be increased, but albumin is decreased. So fibrinogen and globulin is increased. Remember, fibrinogen and globulin is increased, right? Fibrinogen and globulin is increased, but albumin is decreased in ESR. So that is the answer is A, fibrinogen. Now coming to this question, maybe you may have some doubt for this question. It's the prostate needle biopsy, and you can see clearly examiner is mentioning that there is an adenocarcinoma pattern, predominantly cribriform pattern. Predominantly examiner is telling that cribriform pattern is there, followed by crowded but separate glands and a minor component. See this minor component of single cell infiltration. What is the grade this belongs to? Remember that single cell infiltration itself is a grade 5. Remember, so this is the particular question that line defines that it is the grade 5 according to the latest classification or latest criteria for the Gleason scoring. So here I will show you what we do in the Gleason scoring, right? So first we see the pattern of the Gleason scoring. So you can see there are 5 patterns, right? So you can here observe, you can 5 pattern. One is the small uniform gland, as you can see here. Second, more stroma between the glands, as you can see here. There is more expansion of the gland and there is more space between them. Third is distinct infiltrative margin. You can see there is a dark color structure which shows that there is a clear cut infiltration at the margins. Fourth is irregular masses. You can see there is no regular mass, and that is the neoplastic glands, right? Fifth is the only occasional gland formation plus single cell infiltration. That point you have to add, right? So these are the Gleason pattern. When we score, means when we are going to calculate the Gleason score, how we are going to calculate the Gleason score for the prostate biopsy? See this. Whenever we are seeing any tumor of the prostate, there will be more than 2 pattern or more than 1 pattern will be seen on histological examination. So that moment, whatever is the dominant pattern, whatever is looking more, that is called as primary pattern, right? The next after that primary, suppose there are 3 patterns. So what is most dominant is the primary pattern. Next dominant is the secondary pattern. So these are the 2 patterns we take up, and then we calculate to find out the Gleason score. So here Gleason score, 2 numerical grades are added and then combined Gleason score is calculated, right? So if tumor is having only 1 pattern, your mind will be asking, if tumor is having only 1 pattern, then what we will do? If 1 pattern is seen, then we will double them up. That's all, right? We will double them up. That's all. If suppose it is 3 pattern is there, Number 3 pattern is there, so we will double that. 6 will be there, right? So now because grade 1, 2 are not used for the biopsies, now it is not used for the biopsy. That is why I said the lowest Gleason score for the cancer in the biopsy is 6. Remember this point. Examiner may ask this in future question. Lowest Gleason score is now 6 according to the WHO 2016, right? So most well differentiated, when you will be seeing the best well differentiated tumor, Gleason score will be 6. 3 plus 3. You can see what was the here, that only one pattern was there, that is the 3. So when we are going to calculate, we will double it up. So primary, secondary both will be 3, so it is 6. So that is why Gleason score 6 is the most common pattern which you will see in the well differentiated cancer, whereas in least differentiated cancer it will be 10, right? So that is the maximum 5 plus 5, right? So that will be poorly differentiated or least differentiated. Now you can see this is the picture from my book Concepts in Pathology, where you can see this picture is very clear and very conceptual. You can see Gleason score starts from the 6 and ends at the 10, right? So it should be 10, right? So now we can see that what I have written here. Can you notice this Gleason pattern 5, comedo necrosis, cords, solid nest, single cells. Can you notice there is a single cell? So that is how you have to notice. Single cells are there, so it means it is grade 5, right? And cribriform pattern is there, so it means grade 5. So grade 5, so it will be which group? It will be in grade 5 group. So it will be like this. Grade 5 single cell infiltrations are there, right? So this is the prostate adenocarcinoma of grade 5. Gleason scoring will be, Gleason grading will be grade 5, right? So you can see here also in this I have written, if you look at the grade 5 and see the Gleason pattern, you will see there will be lack of gland formation, or remember, lack of gland formation, or maybe a poorly formed cribriform gland, or poorly gland, or you can see here I have written cribriform glands and single cell infiltration. So this is advocated by WHO 2016. This is the latest one. Remember, this is the latest Gleason grading system given by WHO, right? So this is called as new Gleason grading system, which came in 2016, right? So according to that, it is a grade 5 tumor, right? So answer is grade 5. Now next question is again a very conceptual question. You can say that this is again a little tougher question. So a majority of the patho question this time was not very easy, right? I will say that pathology point of view questions were tough, but you should not be demoralized by seeing that it's still a very important subject, and again you can expect the question will be from these topics in and around, right? So the question was colon adenocarcinoma, what is the correct gene sequence? So what examiner is actually asking, when we are seeing the colon cancer from the adenoma carcinoma sequences, so in this sequence, what is the genomic instability we are going to see? That is the question examiner is asking in simple words. If you ask me the concept of this question, examiner is asking from the adenoma to carcinoma, what are the changes examiner asking in a sequential manner? What will be the first one, right? So I have given you answer, it is KRAS. So first you will see KRAS. KRAS will be having activation. KRAS is a proto-oncogene. So it is a proto-oncogene activation, and after that these three are the tumor suppressor genes, which will be having mutation, right? So this activation, KRAS activation, will start the adenoma carcinoma sequence, right? So starting point is KRAS activation. Remember, it is activation, not mutation. So hyperactivation of KRAS will activate this, and then further mutation of the APC P53 DCC gene will be leading to the genomic instability in the colorectal adenocarcinoma. Now you can see this is the key concept. If you look at this key concept, what is the key concept? Gene instability appears to be present during the initiation of the adenoma, right? So gene instability will be in the beginning. So when it is before APC gene, again, before APC gene mutation, right? So before APC gene mutation it will start. And what are that genomic changes? That genomic changes are activation. Can you see this? Activation of the proto-oncogenes, which is called KRAS, and inactivation, or you can say mutation, of the three tumor suppressor genes. So what are these three tumor suppressor genes? APC, right? Remember, APC was question in All India exam is located on chromosome number 5q, right? APC is located on chromosome number 5q. Then loss of P53, which is located on chromosome number 17p. Loss of heterozygosity at chromosome 18. Remember, chromosome 18 is having DCC gene, which is called as deleted in colorectal carcinoma gene. So that is the chromosome number 18. So these are the three important genes, right? APC, P53, DCC, these are all tumor suppressor gene, right? And because of these mutation, there is a development of colorectal cancer. But always remember, what is the beginning step? Beginning step is the activation of the proto-oncogene, that is KRAS, right? Activation of the proto-oncogene KRAS. So now you can see the sequence: KRAS, then APC, then P53, and the last one is the DCC gene. So this is the sequence which is examiner had asked, right? So KRAS followed by APC followed by P53 and then deleted colorectal carcinoma genes, right? So answer is D, right? Come to the next question. This question I don't need to discuss because it's a very simple question, right? Type 4 hypersensitivity reaction is very clear cut answer, that is the cell mediated, right? So it is cell mediated hypersensitivity reaction. Now this question number 11, which of the following is incorrect? Remember, language is very important when you are solving the question. Incorrect, examiner asking about which is incorrect about the RH incompatibility. So we have to understand what is RH incompatibility. What is the simple concept? It is a hemolytic anemia, right? RH incompatibility means you are going, examiner is asking which of the following is not seen in the hemolytic anemia finding, right? So RH incompatibility is hemolytic anemia. So what is not seen in hemolytic anemia? So what happens in hemolytic anemia? Heme will be converted into bilirubin, right? Biliverdin, then bilirubin, all these things will be formed in the liver, and there will be excessive amount of the bilirubin in the liver. So that conjugation protein in the liver will be less. So what will happen? This bilirubin will be unconjugated because it is very high heme level. Because of the high level of the heme, there will be high level of the bilirubin and the conjugation protein will be less. That is why unconjugated bilirubin will be very high, right? So now I understood, unconjugated bilirubin will be high, and from here they will go to the kidney and then it will go to the small intestine, right? In kidney it will be converted into urobilin and it will be coming into the urine. So urinary urobilin you will be seeing, and in the small intestine they will be again converted into stercobilinogen, and some amount will be converted into urobilin, and all these things will be coming into the feces, right? So now you can see that there is a raised stool urobilin, there will be raised unconjugated bilirubin, there will be raised urinary urobilin, right? So urinary urobilin, right? Fecal urobilin, then unconjugated bilirubin, all these things will be seen in this hemolytic anemia. But remember, bilirubin is not there. So this is the right answer. So which is not correct, right? So urinary bilirubin will not be increased. It will be the serum bilirubin, which is unconjugated, which will be increased. You can see there is a picture also. This beautiful picture says about the method of the hemolysis and the problem with this, and right, this enzyme glucuronidase transferase will be less in the hemolysis, and that is why bilirubin will be very high. And which bilirubin it is? It will be unconjugated bilirubin, as I said. Unconjugated bilirubin will be increased, right? Then they are going to the enterohepatic circulation, right? Now you can see bilirubin is enterohepatic circulation converted into urobilinogen, right? And urobilinogen, you can see they are converted into stercobilinogen, and some of them are converted into urobilin, right? So stercobilinogen is forming stercobilin and urobilin, they are coming in stool, right? So now you can see stercobilin and urobilin is coming into the stool. Some of the unconjugated bilirubin is coming into the urine, but they are not in the form of urine, they are coming in the form of urobilin, right? So that is the answer. So now you can see that urobilin in the feces, urobilin in the urine, and unconjugated bilirubin will be there in the blood, not in the urine, right? So that is the answer for this question. Now this question again I will tell, this question is again from my book, and I taught this in my live lecture also. Hayflick limit is, so what is Hayflick limit? It's a very simple question. I will tell you, this was the question which was repeated from the NEET 2014. I used to teach this question very regularly in my classes, live lectures. Hayflick limit is the total number of times a cell can divide in their lifetime, which is the 60 to 70 times. 60 to 70 times, right? So that is called Hayflick limit. So you can see this is my book picture, and answer is A. Total number of cell can divide in their lifetime is the 60 to 70 times. You can see here in high yield info I had mentioned it because this was the question in NEET PG 2014. Normal human cells are capable of 60 to 70 times of division in their lifetime. This is called Hayflick limit. After that, because of the progressive telomere shortening, so Hayflick limit is due to progressive telomere shortening, can be a future question. Remember this point, Hayflick limit is due to progressive, here I will write Hayflick limit. Hayflick limit is due to progressive telomere shortening, right? So because of progressive telomere shortening, Hayflick limit will be there. So cell will be able to divide only to 60 to 70 times. So this is called Hayflick limit or Hayflick phenomena, right? So Hayflick limit, you can say that it is associated with aging also. So examiner can ask this question, they are associated with aging, cellular aging, right? So answer is for lifetime. So now you can see that question. It is the total number of cells can divide in their lifetime, not in a year, not in a month, not in a day, right? It is lifetime, how many times they can divide, that is 60 to 70 times. This was also question in DNB exam 2015. So keep that in mind, examiner can repeat this question again. This is again a simple question which I used to teach in my lecture also, that component of apoptosome with cytochrome C and APOF1 is. So which caspase will be component? So your answer is very easy. It's an intrinsic pathway. Caspase is the procaspase 9, right? You can see this picture again. You can see intrinsic pathway and extrinsic pathway. There are two pathways I have shown here. And you can see whenever there is a stress, it will be activating the mitochondrial membrane. Permeability will be increased. So mitochondrial permeability will be increased, and because of that increase in permeability, you can notice there is a cytosolic cytochrome C has come, which is going to combine with APOF1. Can you see? This is combining with APOF1. So this cytosolic cytochrome when APOF1 is called as apoptosome, right? So now you understood what examiner is asking and what is the function of this apoptosome. You can notice here, this apoptosome is going to activate caspase, procaspase 9 to caspase 9. So answer is procaspase 9, right? Coming to the next question. This is again a question where many of the people are misunderstanding this. DNA methylation is not related with, remember, DNA methylation is associated with mismatch repair, right, which is seen in colorectal cancer, right? It is seen in colorectal cancer. Yes, they are associated with the DNA replication also. So DNA methylation is also associated with DNA replication. Gene silencing also, DNA methylation. Methylation is for the silencing or imprinting or inactivating, right? So that is also associated with this one. Capping, mRNA capping is not associated, remember. So here answer is capping. So capping which we see in mRNA is not because of the DNA methylation, that is the different thing, right? So here we have to understand the answer is capping D. So I have written all these things so that you can understand what will be the future question. See what I said, that DNA methylation can be for normal development, as I have told you, in DNA replication, right? It can be present in DNA replication like normal development. It is associated with the gene silencing, which is the given in this AIIMS exam. It can be dysregulated. You can see here what I'm writing, dysregulated epigenetics in carcinogenesis, right? And carcinogenesis, what I have given you example here is a mismatch repair gene. You can see there is a epigenetic silencing of the mismatch repair gene. So because of that, what will happen? Due to DNA methylation of MLH1 gene, patient will develop sporadic colorectal cancer. So sporadic colorectal cancer will be caused because of the MLH1 gene mutation. So that is the point we have to remember. So this is basically a question. See, this question basically is a question of the ruling out MCQ, right? If you ask me, because it's not purely pathology question, it is the mix of pathology plus biochemistry. So because I know that mismatch repair, they require DNA methylation, right? Majority of the cancer, they have epigenetics. DNA methylation is what? Epigenetics only, right? So in epigenetics only, you see the DNA methylation. So I know that majority of the people will be having cancer because of the epigenetics. So yes, mismatch repair gene is causing colorectal cancer, so it is related. It can be present in gene silencing. Yes, that is also one important thing which we study in genomic imprinting. So I know these two answers are these are the correct answers. So I am leaving with the two options, right? So what is the suggestion for my to all the student? When you are ruling out two options, you must attend that question, then you don't leave it, right? So here capping, you know that capping is a different thing and it is not associated with the DNA methylation, so it should be gene DNA replication, right? So now answer is capping is not associated with DNA methylation, right? Now next question is the another simple question. This is a common sense based question. See, this is a common sense based question because examiner is asking hematopoietic stem cell. See, where examiner is asking hematopoietic stem cell can do all of the following except they can differentiate, yes. They can replicate, yes. They can regenerate damaged tissue, yes. That is the function. They can do dividing without any regulatory control. So that is not possible. There is a regulatory control. Remember, there is a regulatory control. So why I wanted to say this, because this was the question. Again, this is the question in the PGI 2014 and 15. This was the question in PGI exam, right? Pluripotent stem cell requires expression of which of the following transcription factor. So now you can see that stem cell, they require the transcription factor, means they require regulatory factors. So who are these regulatory factors? All these names were given in PGI exam: OCT3, OCT4, SOX2, c-MYC, KFL4. Remember, these were the names which were mentioned in PGI exam, and you can keep this in your mind. Maybe you will be getting this question in your JIPMER also. JIPMER 2016-17 also there was some resembling question like this, right? So transcription factors. So now you can see that stem cells are regulated by these transcription factors, which are OCT3-4, SOX2, c-MYC, KFL4. And there was a question in NEET PG 2015, and that question was here: pluripotency of embryonic stem cell is inhibited by which of the following home-box protein? So that is the nano-G. Remember, nano-G is the inhibitor. Pluripotency is inhibited by and activated by. Can you see this? Pluripotency is activated by OCT3-4, SOX2, c-MYC, KFL4, inhibited by nano-G. So these are the important points which shows that they cannot divide without any regulatory control. So there is some gene regulatory control over the stem cell. Otherwise, the stem cell will become abnormal. Common sense. If there is no regulatory control, they will become a cancer cell, right? So that is the point we have to remember. Answer is D. Now coming to the next question, this is again a very simple question. I am not going to read this question completely. You can see that, right? What is the history here? The patient is coming to the emergency after the trauma, and he is having all those typical feature of the trauma and septicemia, febrile, oliguria, and history of the long bone fracture, right? There is a bleeding into the nasogastrial. See, what is the catch point for this question? Bleeding into the nasogastrial tube and IV cannula sites. When you find this thing, right? See this, when you are, see what you are doing, he was given blood transfusion. You can see there is a catch point here also. He has been given blood transfusion, right? And after that, what he has developed? Tachypnea, febrile, oliguria. So probably he is going for the transfusion reaction. Probably he is going for the transfusion reaction. And remember, it is a very, very important point of the transfusion reaction that this patient will be having bleeding from the IV cannula sites also. IV cannula site or bleeding from the multiple site. That is also one very important feature, or you can say most common feature of the transfusion reaction in a comatose or anesthetized patient, right? So answer is D. And here again I will bring you to your notice that this is the point which had been asked in AIIMS exam. This is the point. You can see blood oozing from the venipuncture. This is my book. Again, I will tell you what it is written. Blood oozing from the venipuncture site is the most common adverse transfusion reaction in the comatose and anesthetized patient. That was again a question in NEET PG 2015. So now you can see there were two direct questions which has been repeated in AIIMS exam from the older NEET PG. What I want to say that by this, what I want to give you a message that all question bank are important. It's not like that for AIIMS exam you will solve only AIIMS question bank. You solve AIIMS, PGI, JIPMER. These are the three standard question bank which will help you in all exam. AIIMS, PGI, JIPMER, right? So now you can see this is the transfusion reaction. So remember, in comatose patient and anesthetized patient, you have to rely on the bleeding from the venipuncture side when you are seeing. Then remember, this is the one of the important transfusion reaction, adverse reaction, right? So this is the transfusion reaction which you have to understand, right? So answer is D, transfusion reaction. Coming to the another simple question, which of the following is true about celiac disease, right? So we have to understand that celiac disease is a very clear-cut risk for the GI lymphoma, And which kind of lymphoma? See, when you talk about GI lymphoma in general situation, it is B cell, DLBL. So here I will write, when you are talking about GI, most common lymphoma, right? So it will be diffuse large B cell lymphoma. But when you are talking about the celiac disease, then it will be enteropathy associated T cell lymphoma. Enteropathy associated T cell type of lymphoma, right? So here it will be T cell lymphoma, right? So this statement is correct. CT scan is not required for the diagnosis. For diagnosis of the celiac disease, as I have discussed in my lecture also, you need biopsy, then particular history of the exposure to the cereals containing gluten diet, and third is the serological investigation, where you will be seeing the transglutaminase and endomysial antibodies. Transglutaminase is the most sensitive test, and endomysial antibody is the most specific test. So what I want to say that diagnosis is not only by the biopsy. Remember, not only by biopsy. Diagnosis is a multimodality approach where you have to use biopsy plus characteristic history. You give gluten diet, he'll be having malabsorption. You remove the gluten diet, malabsorption will be relieved. And the third is the serological investigation, where you will be checking the transglutaminase, which is the most sensitive test, and endomysial antibodies, which is the most specific test, right? So it is not CT scan. Now you understand? Improves with the complex carbohydrates. Yes, complex carbohydrates will not improve. They will precipitate the malabsorption. Most common cause of malabsorption in developing countries. See why examiner had asked this statement. Still, the most common cause of the malabsorption in developing country is the tropical sprue. Remember, but celiac sprue is rising. That is why probably examiner is given this question. Celiac sprue is rising, but it is not most common. Still, the most common is the tropical sprue, right? So remember, tropical sprue is the most common cause of malabsorption syndrome in the developing countries, right? So now you got the answer. Answer is A. Right. This is again a question which is the basic question. Examiner is asking whether you have worked in the department or you have observed the vacutainers or not. Right. So correct about this vacutainer. So you can see the red top. Red top vacutainer is for clot activation. Clot activator. Right. So it is clot activator will be present in this red top. Right. So answer is D. Now I will point out other things which examiner asked or examiner had asked earlier in exam. When you are going for the coagulation studies, light blue will be used. Light blue color will be having what? Sodium citrate. So it is for coagulation studies. Remember, for coagulation studies you will be using sodium citrate. So sodium citrate will be blue in color. Right now you can see what I am going to show you here is the gold and red. Both are clot activators. So be careful. Can be a future question also. Right, red has been asked. Red was this time question. So what will be the future question? Future question will be the gold color is again clot activator. Right, gold color is again clot activator. This green color which you are seeing here, that was the AIIMS question. Heparin tubes are green in appearance. So heparin tubes without plasma separating gel is the darker green, right? And you can see light green color is heparin tubes with the plasma separating gel, right? So now you understood. EDTA, which we use for CBC analysis, complete blood count, will be having lavender color top, right? So this can be another future question which examiner may ask. Like lavender color is for EDTA tube, right? Sodium fluoride, because this is the option mentioned here for the glucose we use. So sodium fluoride can be again a future question. It will be gray in color, right? So now you understood. For clot activation, what we have to extra remember that it can be gold in appearance or it can be red also, right? When we are working in a coagulation lab and using sodium citrate, light blue top will be used. When we are going to CBC analysis, we are going to lavender color, and sodium fluoride for glucose analysis, gray color, and green color is for the heparin. Remember, green, light green is for heparin. So answer is D, clot activation, red color. It can be gold color also. So that is the important point you have to keep in mind for the future. Right. This is again a very simple question from the lecture only. Ito cells are present in which part of the cell? Answer is the space of Debye. So you can see this is again my book. From a book I am showing you here. you can see there is a hepatocytes, right? You can see this is the hepatocyte, and what I am showing you here, this is the blood vessel, which is called as sinusoid, blood vessel or sinusoid, right? And within the sinusoid, you can notice there is a cell, green color, which I had made. This is the Kupffer cell. You see, this is the Kupffer cell. So where is Kupffer cell? Kupffer cells are within the sinusoid. Can be a future question. Within the sinusoid, Kupffer cells are modified macrophages of the liver within the sinusoidal capillaries. Right, now listen to again what I am showing you here. Between the hepatocytes and between the sinusoid, this area is called as space of Dissay. This area is called as space of Dissay, right? And in this space of Dissay, you can see here I have written space of Dissay, you can see, and in this space of Dissay you can see the stellate cell. So now you can notice space of Dissay is having stellate cells, right? Kupffer cells are present in the sinusoidal capillaries, right? So stellate cells are Ito cells. Stellate cells are also known as Ito cells. Here you can see that here it has been marked. Stellate cells are also known as Ito cells. What is the function of these Ito cells? In hepatic fibrosis and cirrhosis, that was the NEET question in 2015 and 16, right? Liver cirrhosis, fibrosis or collagen band is formed because of the Ito cells. So who is forming this? Collagen is formed by Ito cells, and which collagen will be formed by them? Both type 1 and type 3. Remember, both type 1 and type 3 collagen will be causing liver cirrhosis. That was the question in exam, right? So now you understood the perisinusoidal space between the hepatocyte. Can you see between the hepatocytes and the blood vessel, there is a space of Dissay where you will find the Ito cells or stellate cell. So stellate, space of Dissay, right? Now this is again a very simple question. If you have a basic knowledge of the foreign body reaction, then you can easily make up this question, right? 60-year-old female, hip replacement after 1 year, loosening of the implant, histopathology is shown here. What is most likely cause of this condition, right? So now you can see that none of them is associated with the implant, right? So whenever implant is given, right, that implant material or metal will be losing out and they will be coming into the blood, and then they will be deposited in the tissue also, right? So that is called metallosis. So this phenomena is called as metallosis. So answer is metallosis, right? So answer is metallosis. You can see here, you can notice there is a giant cell, and all these dark pigments are the metals, right? And all these eosinophilic area which you are observing, these are the extensive fibrosis because of the metal, right? So now you can see that answer is B. Here I want to tell you about this metallosis. Just briefly I will tell you. Metallosis is also called as metal poisoning, right? Because of the toxic metal, as I have told you. From the implants it will release and they will come into the blood and the surrounding tissue. What will be the histopathology? On histopathology you will be seeing the black pigment as I have shown you, extensive fibrosis and foreign body giant cell reaction. So you can see here in this diagram, what we are seeing here is the foreign body giant cell reaction. So this is the foreign body giant cell reaction, right? This area is the eosinophilic area, is the area of the fibrosis, and this pigmented area is the area which is covered with the metal deposits, right? So now I understood there is an area of fibrosis, there is a pigmented metal deposit and the foreign body giant cell reaction. And this is little bit high power view where you can see a big foreign body giant cell. So this is again a foreign body giant cell. Why I kept this? Because in this foreign body giant cell you can see there is a black pigment also. So this pigment is present within the foreign body giant cell. So pigment is present within the foreign body giant cells, right? So there is another foreign body giant cell, right? So this is how you will identify metallosis. Remember, there will be characteristic history of the loosening of the implant, and this will be the presentation, right, on the microscopic examination. This is again a very important MCQ where many students have committed mistake, that antibody testing for the COVID patient, right? So it should be COVID, right? So that coronavirus patient, in coronavirus patient antibody testing, why we are doing, right? So it is not for viral load. Remember, for viral load you will be doing the PCR. Currently infected and asymptomatic, again you have to use the PCR. For time of incubation you can use PCR again here. But when you are talking about the past infection, which is asymptomatic. Remember, this is very, very important, and this is the answer. So remember, this serology or antibody testing is done for the past infections and the asymptomatic patient, and that is the answer. Here I would like to tell you, this is the CDC guideline from where I have taken this excerpts. You have to understand few important things. When you should be doing the serology, when you should be using it, should be used. When you should be used, previously infected. Can you see this? Previously infected, right? For what purpose? To guide epidemiology and to facilitate contact tracing, right? So that is the point. You can see the first line of the CDC recommendation says that previously been infected patient, right? Why? Because now he is asymptomatic. So previously he was infected. So that is what D answer is the right answer, right? And so serological test when you should do, when he is previously infected, to help in epidemiology and for the identifying the contacts, right? And the second thing is potentially finding out the convalescent plasma donors, because these plasma donors are supposed to be one of the important things which can save the life of another coronavirus affected patient. So by antibody we can identify the donors, right? And to diagnose COVID-19 in RT-PCR negative patient. That is very, very important, because RT-PCR will be negative after the 14 weeks of the infection. So that is the very big problem. So after that it will be negative, and after that what you are going to rely on the antibodies, right? So you can see here, you can see this graph. What is this? In this graph you can see from the day, it's a time post illness onset, right? And you can see after the 14 days there is low or no detectable SARS-CoV viral RNA, right? So what we are going to rely on? We are going to rely on antibodies, serology, antibodies, right? So hereafter you can see only thing which we can see is antibodies. So presence of SARS-CoV specific antibodies in the serum sample when patient will be asymptomatic, right? And you can see that RNA can be detected up to the 14 days of the illness. That is what it has been written. Right, now we have to understand when we should not be using, this serological investigation. For the acute or recent cases, for acute and recent cases, it is better to go for the PCR, right? And the second thing is for the definitive determination of the patient to say that he has been having a protective immunity. So it does not shows that he is having protective immunity. Remember that if you find IgG, IgA, all these things, it's not protective. It means he was previously infected, right? And to guide the personal protective equipment use or adhering to the social distancing practices. So answer is, so remember, answer for this question is antibody testing is for the past infection and asymptomatic. So this was the answer, right? Now biosafety level, this is again a very simple question. If you ask me, biosafety level for SARS-CoV culture is lying in which of the following groups? So it is the BSL-3 group. But why examiner had asked, this is complicated one, because there are two things. When you are going for the virus isolation or cell culture or virus culture, so the question is about the culture only, right? So that is why when we are talking about the culture, you have to follow the biosafety level 3. But remember, in future examiner can ask you procedure with the generating aerosols or droplets. When we are doing this thing, then we can follow the class 2 biological safety cabinet. So this will be the answer for the generating aerosols or droplets, right? So procedures generating aerosols or droplets, you will be following type 2. But here question was about the virus isolation in cell culture. So that is why answer should be biosafety level 3, right? So answer is C, biosafety level 3. But if examiner asks about the there is a risk for the generating aerosols or droplets, then your answer will be the biosafety level 2, right? Now coming to this another important question from COVID, there were 3 questions. So you can see the third question is all of the following are preventive measures used against COVID. So here we all know that this is common sense question. We are all wearing the face mask and hand wash. So right, so 2 options are easily ruled out. So this question I will what I will do, I will definitely attempt this question because I have ruled out 2 options, right? And again I will tell that the 70% of ethanol we are using. So now we can see these 3 things are used. Even glutaraldehyde is a disinfectant which we are using, but remember this is not the concentration. Glutaraldehyde concentration which we are using, it should be 2%. right? So that is the point we have to remember. So what is your answer for this question? So for this question, answer will be glutaraldehyde is not used. 1% glutaraldehyde is not used, right? So you can see here in this table, you can see ethanol is 70% and glutaraldehyde is 2%. So that is the point which I wanted to tell you, right? So glutaraldehyde should be 2%. The last question is about the hemoglobin. This is the basic question again about just checking the knowledge of the student that see, normal rate of synthesis of the various hemoglobin chain in utero has been shown after the birth, and gamma chain, examiner is asking, gamma chain of hemoglobin is indicated by which of the following, right? So here remember, gamma chain is indicated by B. So answer is B. Now I will show you what are the important points which examiner can ask in future exam, right? So first we have to understand fetal hemoglobin. What is fetal hemoglobin? Made up of alpha 2 and gamma 2, right? So here you can see chain A. What I am showing you, chain A is the alpha, right? Chain B is the gamma. So this is the gamma which examiner was asking. This is the gamma chain. Chain C is the beta. So this one which you are seeing is, this is the beta chain, right? And chain D, this one is the epsilon, right? So these are the various chain which we are seeing. Now what I want to point out here, because embryonic hemoglobin was the AIMS question in 2013, right? And examiner had asked about this zeta 2 epsilon 2 Gower 1. Gower 1 was the question in AIMS exam 2013. So examiner can ask this question in the future exam in this pattern also. So to understand this, we will see this picture also and compare. Now you can see this is the question which examiner had asked, right? Where there are two things which were missing, which I have pointed out here. Now you can see that alpha chain, you can see alpha chain is here, beta chain we have seen the gamma chain, delta chain is given, beta chain is given. What we were not showing in that picture is the epsilon and the zeta chain, which is seen in embryonic hemoglobin, right? So now you can see that is the point which I wanted to tell you, that remember epsilon and zeta chain is embryonic hemoglobin. So remember, this is the embryonic hemoglobin which we have to remember. So examiner may ask this question, where is the embryonic hemoglobin, right? So these are important point about the AIMS discussion. If you have any input regarding this option was like this, please put in the comment box of my channel, and or you send me at my email, or any question if you are getting which is from the pathology or related to pathology, you can send me to my email ID. And I wanted to again say that the take away message from this discussion is, do not follow the irregular question. Focus on the regular questions which are coming. You don't need to read about entire cytopathology, because there were 3 questions from the cytopathology, right? Definitely there will be only one question next time, or they'll not be asking any question. So this is the tendency of AIMS people to ask some irregular question in exam to frighten us. So focus on the basic thing, focus on your concept. Solve MCQs of last 2 to 3 years. In and around those MCQs, you read the relevant topics, not the entire things of the cytology, right? And with this, I would like to wish you all the best wishes in every exams of your life. In every exams of your life, I want to give you a best wishes, right? So stay in touch. Post in this comment box if any query you are having. I will solve that thing, right? Bye bye. See you and all the